So I'm going to talk a little bit today about optimization and talk a little bit about some of the frameworks that we use with some of our clients. Just a little bit of background on who we are. We're, as introduced, we're an analytics and optimization consultancy. So we work with clients to help upskill them. We tend not to do the actual work for them in terms of optimization. A lot of that is now being brought in-house. And from my standpoint, you know, that makes perfect sense. You guys know your brands. You guys have got your team set up properly to run all of this. So our role really is to help facilitate you put these programs in place. We also do, obviously, a lot of analytics work as well. We work with a lot of large enterprise clients across Australia and APAC. We've had a lot of these relationships going back about 6 years, so we're really proud of that. We're also, we tend to work with a lot of different technologies within all of these companies. We're an Adobe partner. We've been a partner of theirs for about 6 years. We are also a Google partner, a Google 360 partner. We're one of the few companies in Australia that are both a Google and an Adobe partner, given that they're both competing products. We also partner with Elleston, who's a tag management platform, and ObservePoint, which is a tag auditing platform as well. So we want to know that the data that's going into the platforms is accurate, because if you're making decisions based on that data, then it's got to be as accurate as possible. There's obviously a whole suite of other technologies that clients use around marketing tags and so forth. This is some of the services that we offer from a data strategy standpoint, trying to figure out the right sort of data that you need moving forward, right the way through to testing and personalization, and pretty much everything in between. We do a lot of data integrations. We're talking to a lot of clients at the moment around data lakes and that single view of the customer as well. And it's today that I want to talk a little bit about the testing and personalization side of things. Just a quick show of hands. How many people here are embarking on an optimization journey at the moment? Yeah, a few of you? Okay, that's good. So it's one of the things that a lot of people are talking about these days. A lot of companies are now starting to go down this path, and we're seeing a lot of companies struggle to get these programs underway. Optimization, if you look it up in the dictionary, this is what it'll sort of say. It's a process or a methodology of making something better. Mathematical procedures involved in improving this. There are two main kind of types of optimization. The first is through testing, and then the second is through personalization. And it's this one today that we're going to be focusing on around testing. Everybody's probably heard of, A/B testing, MVT testing. A/B is testing two very specific things. And I'll talk a little bit about this a bit later, but that's the key thing here. You are testing only two things against each other. The second one, multivariate testing. This is where we're testing lots of combinations of the same things together. So it might be lots of headlines against lots of creative, against lots of call to actions. And you're trying to find the right combination of that content that works best. So as a lot of teams embark on this journey to find the utopian world of testing, all of the vendors will tell you it's really straightforward to do, and you're going to get massive uplift. You're going to get 800% results, and you're going to launch it. Think about a test at breakfast and have it live by mid-morning, and results are going to be flowing in by lunchtime. All of the case studies point to this as well. If you just go and search on optimization case studies, everybody will be reporting, massive lifts on really straightforward stuff. And, they're all over the internet, these things. The reality is it's a little bit more like this. It's a little more chaotic. We tend to find clients are trying to test absolutely everything all at once. There's no process in place for doing this. And they tend to test massive, complex things. And it's the complexity in it that kind of makes it all fall over for them. This is a typical adoption curve that we see a lot of our clients. They go through this time and success, and you know they've worked had a few tests running in the early days, and it's been pretty successful. But this is all on top of the day-to-day stuff that they've got to do, and then they hit this peak, and there's more BAU stuff coming through the business, and it gets really hard, and the tests get harder, and the results get less and less, and then it all goes downhill real quick. And we tend to get called in at the bottom of that to try and fix whatever the issue is, and we get them to refocus, restructure, and relaunch the optimization program. So today I'm going to share with you 5 insights that we've learned and that we help clients learn through the process of optimization. We're not actually going to be sharing any results of tests. There's 1,000,001 case studies that are out there on the internet. What we want to do is help you try and figure out the best way to put an optimization program in place. And so these are some of the learnings that we've had over the years working with clients as well. The first one is ambiguity will definitely, if you remove it, it'll lead to success. A lot of clients we find are just launching a testing program without really thinking about the clarity of it, without really thinking about what it is that they're trying to achieve. There's an awful lot of things to do when you're actually running a test. It's not as straightforward as just kind of, build a piece of creative and push it out through the platform. The platform piece is pretty straightforward, but everything that goes with it is the tough part. And the first thing you've got to do is create this culture of accountability within the teams. The actual process of optimization is much, much bigger than a single resource doing it within an organization. It's team-wide. So you've got to have this clear set of responsibilities and accountabilities across everybody. Right the way from the CX person through to the developer, and more importantly, the stakeholders that are actually going to endorse this program. We'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit. The other part is you've got to have clear test plans. Now, test plan is really just stating what it is that you're trying to do, but there's a lot of variations of this picture out there. You've got somebody says, I want to do it this way, I want, how the customer explained it, or how, as a marketer, you're going to explain that's what you want to test. What comes out the other end is something entirely different because the development team did it slightly differently, or when you ran the test, you were looking at different goals, you couldn't quite state it properly. So the first thing we've got to do is make sure that our test plans are very, very clear. Got to clearly state a goal. What's the one single thing that you're trying to achieve on this test? The second thing on a test plan is take a picture of it. What is the thing on the page or on the mobile device that you're trying to change? And again, it is a single thing that you want to change, not multiple things. If you can't see a single thing to change, it's not a good test. And then the third thing is the hypothesis. And the hypothesis is, well, I'll show you a demonstration of a hypothesis in a second. Come back to this visual of what is being actually tested. If you think about a tractor, there's a lot of levers on a tractor. They're actually quite complicated to move forward. A lot of levers, a lot of buttons, a lot of pedals. You could randomly pull all of them or push them or stomp on the accelerator. Eventually you might get it moving forward, but you won't know specifically what made it move forward unless you're pulling one of those levers at once, not multiple levers. Case in point, you might have run a test like this where you've got a sign-up form and 2 variations of it, and they're out there in the market, and one of them just absolutely canes it, works. Brilliant. You take it to your boss, and your boss says, awesome. What was the thing that made it work? You go, crap, I don't know, I've changed too much. I couldn't tell you the one thing on this one. There's too many variations. We see this all the time with not a clear test that's actually being run. Here's a better version of it, that the clear thing that's being actually changed on this is the layout on it. So it's very easy for you to say afterwards, oh yeah, it was the layout that made that test work. Hypothesis is absolutely critical for you to write first before you go down and you try and run a test. If you can't write a clear hypothesis, then you need to kind of think about that test again so that you can go back and write one. They're very straightforward. It's just a straightforward, simple statement. If we do something, then something will happen because of this. So here's an example of not a great hypothesis. If we simplify the user journey, then quote starts will increase due to people having less visual distraction. Now, there's so much ambiguity in there. Where would you start? You're trying to simplify the user journey. Yes, we all want to simplify the user journey, but there's nothing specific in there that we can actually test. So a better hypothesis to lead to a test would be if we change a call to action from next step to proceed to payment, then the application completion rates will improve due to people having clarity about the next step in the process. Now, the single thing that we're changing here on a test is that call to action on that button. It's the same thing. It's still part of that user journey, but it's a lot clearer in terms of what we're trying to do. We see a lot of clients just jump into testing without kind of figuring out whether the test is a smart test to do, whether it's going to be worthwhile moving down the road. So we always say, stop and sanity check things. There's a really easy way to sanity check your tests. There's a whole bunch of things that you need to actually do, but right off the bat, start with an empty whiteboard. I would, but I can't. Get some stickies out and start putting your tests in terms of the quadrant. You've got effort along the bottom. How hard is it to actually implement this test? And the impact. How much impact do you think you'll have on revenue or on whatever it is, the thing that you're trying to test? And just start to place your stickies around. And it's often best to get part of your development team as part of this process to figure out how hard it is to do something. We've seen a lot of clients that are making or trying to put tests together that are very complex, very large. They spend an awful lot of time because there's a lot of effort involved in running this test. Start at the top left-hand corner. That's high impact, low effort. Those are your call to actions, changes to layout and things like that. When you get down into the bottom right-hand side, high effort, low impact, don't test those. There's better ways to test those. And I'll show you some of those in a little bit. So that's the first step to sanity checking. The second step is to validate the duration of your test. Now again, a lot of people just kind of push a test up and let it run for a little bit. But you actually need to know how long you need to run the test for. There's a ton of tools out there you can figure this out. It's just going to ask you how many visitors you get to the site, what's your conversion rate, how much lift are you looking for, and it will give you an estimate as to how much traffic you actually need on a daily basis, and how long, more importantly, how long in days the test is going to run for. Calling a test too soon is probably one of the biggest sins in terms of it. The other thing is not waiting for this thing, statistical significance. Now, there's the reason that we do this, it's the change in the relationship. But think of it in terms of the likelihood that if you run this test again, you're going to get the same results. The higher statistical significance you get, you want to wait for 95%, then you're going to get the same results. It's taken all of that randomness out of the testing. Here's a good example of that. This was a test that was run by a client, and that's kind of the results at the moment. You'd think, okay, we've got a winner. It's been running for nearly 2 months. 75% statistical significance. Happy days. We've had a fair amount of people go through it, and we've had more than 100 conversions, which is really what we want to aim for in terms of beginning to think about calling a result. 75%. Would you call that a winner? No? Good, because it absolutely flipped a few days later. And they would have lost, this one actually 18.5% lower from a test result standpoint. This reached 99% significance about 3 months after the test began. And that was because they'd got actually low volume of traffic going through the conversion thing. So absolutely critical to wait for statistical significance. Again, a lot of people just try and test everything. A/B testing or multivariate testing is not suitable for some things. Some things are best left to other platforms. We had a client that was involved in months of development of a new variation of a user journey that they wanted to push live. And they pushed it live. They spent thousands and thousands of dollars on this new user journey. They got to the end of it. They couldn't prove a result either way. Too much had changed in the middle. They weren't changing a single thing. They weren't learning anything out of these tests. They'd been running these types of tests for months. So we helped them kind of develop a bit of a criteria for rethinking about what is a good test. And for them, it was, if it's less than $1,000 to actually implement the change, or if it can be done in between 5 and 10 hours of an internal resource, run it as an A/B test. Otherwise, start to think about other tools. There's plenty of other tools out there on the market for this. The actual framework itself looks a lot like this, but there's other tools. If you're getting down to visual design or you're trying to think about navigation, use TreeJack, for example. Use Loop 11. Usability testing. Everybody, a few years ago, everybody was talking about usability testing and doing proper usability testing. It's still very valid, and now you can crowdsource it as well. So there's lots of other ways to think about A/B testing, or think about testing, rather than just A/B testing. Setting expectations eases a lot of pressure. Everybody wants to run tests. Everybody wants to run a test that's going to impact dollars. And there's this notion that if you're running a test, you've got to be impacting the dollars. You've got to be impacting the sales. The reality is, though, if you're running a test up here, somewhere further away from wherever that thing is happening, that purchase, it's only going to really impact the next step. You shouldn't be thinking about running a test at the top of the funnel and it's going to impact sales. It's too far away. There's way too much stuff going on in between that they can drop out of, or that they could be influenced by other factors. So think about where the test is being run and make sure that you're managing those expectations to your stakeholders that we're going to run this test, but it is not going to impact sales. It might lead to a change in sales, but it's not going to directly impact it. And then the fifth one is around making sure that you've got stakeholder endorsement. Without having stakeholders in on this program, it can be quite daunting. We talked a little bit earlier about using a RACI model to figure out roles and responsibilities across the team. Once you've got those stakeholders involved, you'll have a lot better success across this. We had another client that we'd spent weeks working through a program with them to put a whole optimization program in place. The team had been stood up, and they'd all kind of said, yes, we want to do this. They were all massively enthused. We checked in with them a little while later about how they were progressing things, and after about a month, nothing had happened. And what they hadn't thought about was they didn't have the capacity at this point in time to run those tests through. So while we had to go and seek stakeholder endorsement. Once that was in place, they got additional resourcing, and then the test program all kicked off and went full steam ahead. So it's definitely important to make sure you've got those stakeholders, stakeholder buying. So how do you begin an optimization program that is business as usual? It's not on top of everything else that you're doing. Well, the first thing is absolutely remove that ambiguity. If you've removed that ambiguity, you've got clear things that you're testing, you can communicate it clearly across the organization. That's definitely the first step. There's a few other things that you've got to do. The first is have a strategic process in place, have a proper process, have great test processes and great test practices, and this culture of accountability. Now, we use a framework. These are kind of the steps involved in putting a test live. You've got the idea mining phase. And you've got to sanity check that, build a proper test plan, build the thing, push it live, put it out into Optimizely or one of the other platforms, run the test, let it run for the right length of time, and then when you've reached that statistical significance, analyze the results. You might have had a lift in something, but you've absolutely killed something else. So make sure you're looking across a few other metrics as well. And then share the results across the organization. Don't keep it within the team. If you're sharing it, then you're encouraging other people to buy into this program as well. One of the hardest things, though, is once you start this and people get enthused by it, then everybody's going to be throwing ideas at you. And this is why you need a really good platform for the idea mining phase. And you can share that then with the company. Something like Trello boards is a great platform for that. And you can see the test as it's running through each phase. Second part is make sure you know what you're doing within every step of the way. There's a whole bunch of different tasks involved. Sanity checking, 3 or 4 different things you need to do to sanity check. When you build the test plan, you're making sure that you're very clear about those goals and what the hypothesis is, etc. So make sure you fill out all of that. You're going to get an output of each thing before it moves on to the next stage. It might be a list of tests that we're going to run. It might be, yes, we know how long we need to run this test for. Then it goes to having a proper test plan, goes to the developers to build it, and so forth. And then finally, make sure you've got clear roles and responsibilities across the entire team for building, running, thinking about these tests, and sharing these results. Thank you. That's it.